Good morning, friends. Let's begin with a prayer, and then we'll jump into our piece of music for this week, which is If You're Seeking Freedom. So let's start together. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, dearest friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, our friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow before you all. Be with us today. Help us to feel your consciousness flowing through this music. Help us to understand its deeper message, its roadmap towards inner freedom, towards everlasting fulfillment, towards increasing inner expansion. And help us to share this vibration through our joy, through our love, to all whom we meet. Om, peace. Amen. So today's song is Swami Kriyananda's If You're Seeking Freedom, which will forever, in my mind, have the association, which is perhaps somewhat unique, in that it will forever remind me of being in third grade. Because when I was in the third grade, David Eby was one of my teachers, and he had us sing a lot of Swami's music, which was really wonderful. And this was one of the pieces that he had us do, because as you'll see in a moment, if you're not already familiar with it, it's a really fun, lively, bouncy piece that one could easily entertain third graders with, including my fine self, apparently. And each one of the verses, one of us got to play one of the parts of the character who was seeking freedom in some particular way. So in the first verse, when we're seeking freedom in a revolution, we all got to run around pretending like, we were the American revolutionists, fighting the British. And then in the second verse, I still remember one of my friends got to pretend to be the miser in this marble mansion, counting his money and fearing a sunburn and things like that, which it'll all make sense if you're not already familiar with the lyrics in a moment. And we had someone, too, who got to be the king in the third verse, who was reigning over all of his subjects with an imperious demeanor, but then we all got to jump him like Caesar at the end of the verse. And so this song has a very playful place in my own memory. And it's been very fun, very enjoyable for me this last week to rediscover it now as an adult, of course, hopefully, and also as a devotee, and trying to ask Swami, what is the secret of this song, and what does this song have to teach us more than just idle entertainment, but what is the deeper spiritual message that it contains? Because, Swami called his music often philosophy in song, and I think that is a perfect description of what this piece of music is. It's much more than just entertainment. It's actually a profound truth encapsulated in such a way that it's easy to digest. So now with that in mind, let's enjoy this piece of music, enjoy its humor, enjoy its poetry, but let's also listen with that inward awareness and see if we can understand what Swamiji is inviting us into. I also realized, and perhaps I hope you can enjoy this with me, that this video series will be a chronology of my skill as a guitarist. And so, after completing the 190 songs of Swamiji, we'll get to look back and see the hours and how things have improved. So anyway, bear with me. Surely in another few years, we'll be a little bit more facile. Okay, let's see. If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. If you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be in waiting for foes everywhere. But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires. Why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. For never can you buy it, grasp and you'll deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. And if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains. Got sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. Let's rest for just a moment in that after effect of that melody, feeling its joy, its invitation towards that inner freedom. And just imagine, what would it be like to live in this vibration all the time? What if this were the theme song of your heart? The underlying melody of your consciousness. What would that do to you, to your daily life, to the way you interacted with your friends, to the way you held yourself in your work environment? Just wonder for a moment. Om, peace, amen. You know, one of the things I love most about music is it transcends the intellect. That we could talk about all the elements of music, like I have been trying to dive into over the last few weeks, you know, elements such as melody or rhythm or the poetry and words and things like this. But at the end of the day, what music is much more than the sum of all of its parts. And to really feel music, we have to feel it with the heart, but we can't break it down intellectually. We have to just intuitively understand what it means. And that's one of my favorite things to do with Swami's music, is not just cut it apart with my mind, but feel after the song is finished, or feel during its melody, and just like we did together right there, wonder, what would it be like to live in this vibration? What would it be like if this were the spontaneous melody of my own heart? And I sometimes think in terms like that. As a musician, it's helpful to me, because we're all constantly vibrating. You know, a friend was actually just telling me yesterday that she met a psychic type person. And you know, there's some psychics who can see an aura, some psychics who can see your past lives, but this particular person, their sensitivity was such that they actually would hear the vibration of your aura, that they would hear a pitch, like a musical note, that was the vibration of Om that you were in tune with. And that the dissonance within it would be what caused the disharmony in your life. And so this person would be able to give you a tone to help heal your vibration, to help heal your heart. And apparently they were, you know, fairly successful in doing this, but what was interesting is when they came to Ananda and people were asking, oh, well, what tone should I sing? She said, oh, you don't need one. Just sing this, keep singing this music. Just keep chanting, because that is purifying your vibration. And so it's fun to think that all of us have a vibration. And when we say things like this, like can you feel that person's vibration? Can you feel the vibration of this place or this song? But think, we have a vibration. We have a specific gravity of our own consciousness. And so that means Like if we could be like that psychic for a moment, we could hear the melody of our own consciousness. We could hear what that symphony would sound like and just wonder, what would it be? When, if you could look in the mirror, so to speak, what would you see? What would you hear if you could hear the vibration of your own heart, or the undercurrent of your own consciousness? And it might surprise you. There might be some wonderful underlying melodies that you hadn't considered before. Some beautiful swelling melodies in your heart. But there might also be some glitches here and there, or some disharmony. But what would it be if a song like this, or what was constantly playing in the background of your heart, what would that do to you? How would you walk through life? How would you meet every opportunity, every circumstance? Just, isn't that interesting to contemplate? And of course, that's nothing that we can really articulate with words, but it's effective for me just to wonder, just to imagine, just to allow my heart to dare, to expand into a way of being like that. So at any rate, that was just a little bit of a tangent, but let's approach Swamiji's music with curiosity and with interested application in that way. This is not just entertainment. This is really a vibrational medicine. This is helping us to tune into that ray of consciousness which Swamiji did himself. So now, with all that being said, it's a fun piece of music, isn't it? And you can see why David Eby had a gaggle of third graders sing this, because, it's a very peppy, rhythmic song that we could march around, and it tells a very interesting story about all the different types of worldly pursuits. The melody is simple and yet interesting, and it surprises you about halfway through every time in such a way as to snare your attention every time you think you're beginning to wander away. It drags you back. And so this is perfect for small children, but it's also perfect for all of us. And what's been very enjoyable for me, just when I was meditating on this music in preparation for this class, I realized, the title, If You're Seeking Freedom. Aren't we all seeking freedom? Aren't we all looking for a greater sense of freedom, a greater sense of happiness, a greater sense of expansion? And apparently, Swami chose that word freedom because in America we have a natural love of that word. And the sort of American consciousness loves the concept of freedom. But apparently in Italy, and I'll have to get someone to confirm this, but apparently when they sing this in Italian, they change the word from freedom to joy. That they sing, if you're seeking joy. Because in Italy, the word freedom doesn't mean so much to them culturally. And so when I pick up a song like this, I like to just remind myself that we could replace that word freedom for any quality of God. If you're seeking joy, if you're seeking divine love, if you're seeking divine fulfillment, if you're seeking happiness, and certainly all of us are seeking those things, that we're all seeking happiness and hoping to avoid pain. So this song is really a roadmap for all of us towards God realization. And now, you might be thinking, now wait a minute, weren't we just talking about revolutions and guns and being a millionaire in a marble mansion? How does this have to do with finding lasting fulfillment? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because that was exactly the same question I asked myself. And what I began to realize as I looked at these lyrics is it's actually quite brilliant that it seems to me each of the verses describe a false theory of happiness based on one of the chakras. And the chakras can seem so esoteric and like out of reach of daily practical life, but yet they are the things that create our lives. They are the things that create our consciousness and create our experience and even create our conditions and magnetize our circumstances to us. And this song, in a way, is actually helping us to redirect those chakras towards higher fulfillment. Here's what I mean. The first verse says, if you're seeking freedom in a revolution, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. And what's interesting is this verse reminded me very much of the first chakra. that when our first chakra is sort of pointing in the wrong direction, we hope that the world itself will conform to make us happy. We hope that the system will take care of us, that the structure of the world will be so perfect that we won't have to put out any energy ourselves to be secure. And we see this a lot in discussions in our modern day, don't we? We hear a lot of people talking about how the world would be perfect if only some political regime would change. And yet Swami's telling us here, you'll find it amazing that even when you finally had that political overhaul that you think will change everything, you're still exactly the same. You're still exactly as bound as you were before. And so the first chakra in this first verse is, I mean, even though one could say, revolutions sometimes are very needed and are dharmic, but we can't think to find our inner fulfillment by any outward change. And so even this first verse is telling us, don't seek fulfillment by changing the outward world. And if Swami were to just leave us with only this first verse, we'd probably walk away feeling, well, but what am I supposed to do then? And that's what happens to many worldly people when they hear yogic philosophies. They say, well, we can't just sit around and do nothing, which is in fact true. But bear with me, friends, because Swami has the answer. As we go through the verses, he will reveal where we should be putting our energy and where we can find true fulfillment. So the first verse, we hear about revolutions, we hear about guns blazing, about trying to change the outward world. And, not all of us are necessarily wanting to pick up arms and go change the world through a revolution, but have you ever wished the world to be other than it was? Have you ever wished that it wasn't raining when it was? Have you ever wished that that one person at work wasn't so obnoxious? That, in a way, is the same thing. You're just wishing that some external circumstance would change to, quote, make you happy. Every time we do that, we are surrendering our inner poise, our inner peace, to an outward condition. And as he says, you won't find it there. So then the second verse comes in, and then it says, if you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. And of course, the marble mansion is not literal, but it's meaning a particular theory of happiness, meaning perhaps through wealth, through prosperity, through success in the world. And then he goes on to say, because even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. And I cannot, like I mentioned, sing this song without getting like a flashback to my friend who played that part in the 3rd grade, and he played it perfectly. And in a way, there's wisdom in the mouth, comes from the mouth of babes, or in this case, wisdom in the face of babes. Because I remember the face that my friend would put on when he would play this part. And, he just had this knit brow and this overly concerned and these hunched shoulders as he's pretending to be counting his stacks of money, and the rest of us were pantomiming, playing outside. And it was so evident in that, enactment of the scene that he was the one missing out on life. And yet, how many times do all of us find ourselves with the thought, oh, I'd be happy if only my bank account said X, or I'd be happy if only my bank account said Y, or I'd be happy if I had a little bit more money, if I had that raise, or whatever it may be, if I had that car, if I had that marble mansion. Whenever we think to be able to find happiness through purchasing things, as Swami says, you won't find it there. And now, it's easy to say, but it's a lot harder to live in this vibration, isn't it? And many of us who have been on this path, or who have read the teachings of the great masters of all religions, we know that this is true. But it's one thing to understand it with your mind, and it's another to feel it in your heart. Isn't that so? And it's certainly so for me. And that's the genius of a song like this, is because with its playful, with its very enjoyable melody, you can sing a song like this innocently, and your subconscious mind won't fight you. It doesn't resist you so much. And yet, as you sing these verses, it's giving you a very subtle and very deep teaching that you're not going to find your happiness through money. You're not going to find your happiness through outward protection in the world. And those are the first 2 chakras. And then in the 3rd verse, we come to the great throne of power, which of course is like the 3rd chakra, power, self-control. But where the third chakra often goes wrong is, trying to control other people. And so the third verse says, if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be and waiting for foes everywhere. And again, these verses are all playful, but really Swami is giving us a deep truth that if you think to find your own happiness or a sense of freedom or fulfillment by being powerful over other people, you'll rob yourself of the very thing you're hoping to find because of the tension in your own heart. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, as I might, well, I'm no tyrant. I'm no Stalin looking to, dominate the world or something. Well, have you ever been a petty tyrant in your own home? In your own relationship? Have you ever tried to control somebody else, manipulate somebody else? I'm not proud to say that I certainly have. That's my third chakra, succumbing to an old pattern of seeking fulfillment. And as it again says, you won't find it there. So then we begin asking ourselves, well then, what the heck am I supposed to do? Because you've told me not to seek outward change, not to seek money, not to try and find power over other people. So what am I supposed to do with myself then? Well, Swami gives us the answer in the next two verses. And interestingly, I still think these correlate somewhat with the chakras. And, this is loose. I don't think we need to get too riveted into this idea. I just thought it was an interesting correlation. But in the fourth verse, he says, but if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires. And of course, the heart is the center point of desires in our astral anatomy. That the heart is where the likes and the dislikes are kept. And he says, why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. Meaning, why define your wealth by things? Why define yourself by likes or dislikes? And you'll discover that you have wealth everywhere. And then the verse goes on, for never can you buy it. Grasp and you'll deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded. It's free as the air. And interesting too that the air is the quality of the heart chakra. That expansion, that freedom of air. And so when we sing that verse, we're beginning to discover the true direction of happiness, the true meaning of how to find freedom or joy or love or whatever it is that we're seeking by casting away our desires, by no longer bartering from life, by no longer being a vaishya, a merchant, only willing to put out energy in exchange for something else, but by expanding ourselves. By no longer grasping, trying to hold, but rather being free, simply opening ourselves. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. But even still, we might be wondering, well, how can I then direct my energy effectively? And in the fifth verse, we begin to see more of the answer. And he says, if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains, God's sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. And it's interesting to me that in mythology, the deity related to the throat chakra is often called the messenger. That he is the one who is able to traverse the land of men and the land of the gods. That it's the throat chakra that gives us the capacity to see the divine latent, hiding within even the world. That we begin to see God's presence everywhere. And that's what this fifth verse is really talking about. That if you want to find freedom, if you want to find God, seek it in those places where God is closest, on the mountains, with His sunlight on your shoulders, His wind in your hair. For there you'll begin to see the veil slipping away. Then you'll begin to feel God's living presence. And once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. You'll be free in yourself. And as I believe it was Master, but perhaps it was Swamiji said, if once you find God within, you'll find Him everywhere. Everywhere without of yourself. You'll see Him everywhere. What a beautiful promise that is. And what a beautiful goal to all aspire towards. And it's something that may feel so out of reach or so out of context of our daily life. But this song gives us a direction of aspiration. We all know what it's like to slip into those lower theories of happiness as described by the first three verses. And we can all at least imagine what it would feel like to live in those higher three verses. So this song is much more than just light entertainment, but it's a deep invitation to live in a higher soul way. So let's sing it again together, but I'm actually going to highlight, I was going to play it on my cello, but time has slipped through my fingers. And so I'll actually just sing one line. There's one note I want us to really pay close attention to, which often goes unnoticed. And I'll just sing the first verse. If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. So far, so good. But once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing. That one little note right there is actually, in a way, one of the most interesting notes in the whole piece of music. It's very outside of the key. And it sort of, if you listen, it sort of makes your ears perk up. That's what I was referring to when I said there's a note halfway through every verse that kind of grabs your attention and shakes you out of being lulled into complacency. And if you pay attention, there's usually an emphatic word on every time that note comes around. That in every verse, Swamiji's making a point. He's saying, this is how you think you'll find happiness, but actually, if you adjust your expectations and your consciousness in this way, you might just find it after all. So let's take close attention to that one note, which I'll sing one more time. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. So I'm going to take one more sip of water because I'm fighting a little frog in my throat, apparently, and then we'll sing this song together. Okay. So let's sit up straight together. And let's concentrate briefly in the heart center, feeling there a yearning for deeper freedom, a yearning for God's presence, for God's joy. And let's lift that feeling of the heart upwards towards the spiritual eye with a sense of lightness and joy, a joyful expectation of finding what it is that we're seeking. If you're seeking freedom in a revolution, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For once the guns stop blazing, you'll find it amazing how the world can drag on just as before. If you're seeking freedom in a marble mansion, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For even when it's sunny, you'll be counting money, keeping up that showcase, your face lined with care. And if you're seeking freedom on a throne of power, oh, if you're seeking freedom, you won't find it there. For though men all obey you, what if they betray you? Tense you'll be in waiting for foes everywhere. But if you're seeking freedom, cast away desires, why barter like a beggar? You've wealth everywhere. For never can you buy it, grasp and you'll deny it. Freedom can't be hoarded, it's free as the air. And if you're seeking freedom, seek it on the mountains. God's sunlight on your shoulders, the wind in your hair. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. For there's no one can hold you, boss about or mold you. Once your heart is free, you'll be king everywhere. Blessings, friends. Let's try and live in this vibration throughout the week. We'll see you next time.